I had a chance to talk to the CEO of Goldman Sachs. It was a very frank discussion with Lloyd Blankfein about some of the most pressing issues facing our two countries.
At the end of the day, Goldman Sachs is a good convener of companies and big institutions, investors. We also have a direct interest in growth. Our success correlates with growth around the world, and we think the most important relationship in the world is the relationship between the U.S. and China, and the most important element of that relationship is investment and trade.
When you look at that area of the world for opportunity, and you look at China, and some people might be critical. There are critics out there who say, well, look at what Congress is doing, right? There are some serious conflicts between the United States and China. You are sort of there and doing business. Do you feel any pressure from some of the complaints from whether it's the White House or Congress on national trade issues?
No, not at all. In fact, the speakers at this conference include our trade representative, U.S. Trade Representative Froman, Penny Pritzker, the U.S. Secretary of Commerce is downstairs. No, there's a lot of interest in promoting it. But look, it's not, there's controversy within the United States. Is this a good deal or a bad deal? Do we want to have, there are no doubt people who think that trade an investment treaty will cost U.S. jobs. Other people think it will create U.S. jobs, which is, by the way, what we think as well. So that's not a big surprise. And of course, there's a dynamic between the United States and China. Look, at the end of the day, there's an organization of the world. China's role is growing. It's going to necessarily elbow itself in, and it should, given the importance of the country and the size of its economy. And there's going to be friction along the way. We can't let that friction derail the fact that every issue in the world that needs to be worked on will be more easily resolvable if the United States and China cooperate with each other.
The CEOs that you're speaking with, what is their main concern?
Oh, I think on the most narrow, the CEOs we're dealing with want to invest in China. They want to transact with China. They want to export to China. Their concerns, on the other hand, is they recognize that China's competition. They can't deflect, even though maybe people would like to, competition in general, but they want to make sure that what the competition happens is fair competition, in other words, not government supported. And so they'll have their issues on both sides, but it's undeniable that they would like those markets opened up to the U.S. and in return have the U.S. markets open to China. Also, in addition to trade and investment from the United States, a lot of those people would like investment from China. China needs a lot of infrastructure and a lot of development, but it has more reserves than it can absorb healthily now, and so you're going to get Chinese investment in the United States as well.
Goldman's involved in a number of businesses, from debt offerings to equity offerings to private equity and even private investments. One of the big ones is initial public offerings.
Right.
We can't ignore Alibaba. There's been more scrutiny over Chinese public offerings in the United States of late. How do you see the future of companies going public from China here in the United States?
Well, you see all the demand for Alibaba shares in the United States, so obviously people accept the growth stories. Nobody's prejudiced to participating in the growth story of China and with great companies. But when you're dealing, and it's not just China, when you're dealing with companies that organize themselves under different organizing principles, different accounting rules, different governance levels, of course there's going to be scrutiny in the United States as you go from one country to another. By the way, it's reciprocal. When we want to do something and do something in China, and it originates outside of China, there's a lot of scrutiny of that, which is why a treaty that defines minimal requirements, a fair and symmetric investing environment from one side to the other, national treatment, that's why that's so important. Over time, people will be relieved. This is all new.
Reforms in China, much talked about, specifically financial reforms when it comes to the capital markets. Is there one reform that you'd like to see pushed through that hasn't gone through yet?
Well, I think, look, all the reforms are on track, and it's a very, very big part of the priority set of the Xi government. And it's declared reform, and we applaud that, and we understand how problematic it is to move along. Maybe my context as a financial services CEO skews my point of view, but I think one of the first reforms should be in the financial services sector, because what the financial services sector, all industries accomplish something narrow with respect to their own industry. But what financial services does is it finances other industries, and at the same time, it provides a mechanism for allocating capital efficiency. So in other words, people come with a good idea, investors yay it or nay it, they like it or they don't like it, and there's a market that helps allocate capital. If people can't pay off their debt service, then companies have to sell themselves, and that capital gets recycled. What the financial service does, in addition, like all other companies, it advances the interests of its industry, but it's also the predicate for financing other industries and making capital allocation decisions, which is why I think it should be an early beneficiary of reform.
When you think about China, there are plenty of opportunities, and you've highlighted a number of them. But there are also significant challenges as well. Let me just start quickly with the debt issue. Is it an issue?
I think it might be. I'm not sure. And one of the other issues is transparency. So the fact that I'm not sure is itself an issue. But I think you have to look at China and what China has accomplished basically in a generation. And so it's not a shock to me that I would define a lot of things as growing pains. And the country is, certainly well managed, well run, and recognize, and by the way, most importantly, recognize its issues. Transparency, openness, and I think trying to grapple with certain, with the issue of, environmental issues, the issue of corruption, which is widely spoken, disseminated. These problems have to be sorted through. So while we're going through the process of coming to sustained growth, in other words, environmentally favored growth, some investment that otherwise would take place is not taking place. While people are sorting out certain organizational issues and corruption issues, maybe certain decisions are being put off that otherwise would be made. And we're watching these things and are very hopeful that these things resolve soon. But I'm telling you, China has moved faster on everything than any other developing economy has in history.
Phil, some very optimistic words from Lloyd Blankfein over there. He's very pro this treaty. Members of Silicon Valley a little bit more hesitant. Now, one thing that I'm pretty sure Lloyd Blankfein is hesitant or concerned about is the situation in Europe. Investors have been watching that very closely. We have the EU and Greece so far failing to come to an agreement on the EU bailout program and how it's going to continue. Those talks are going to resume on Monday. In the interim, what does a man like Lloyd Blankfein think about this? Does he see a Greek exit, a Grexit, as something that's on the horizon?
Well, obviously we talked about that, and it's fascinating, because here's my question to him. This was special. You want to hear this. So I asked him, if Greece was an employee of his, being he's CEO, would he keep the employee or would he fire the employee? Check this out.
Different situation. The answer is I might, but I am not burdened by the economic well-being and the political, and given how much investment has been made in the investment in sorting out the politics of Europe, depending on kind of the mutualization of Europe through the EU and the single currency, with that weight on my shoulders, I probably would want to work it out.